Okay, so we're now in the Yerushalmi's Kasha, which we've spent a few days on. Why did the Jewish people not eat matzah? Because of the Isser of Chadash. Why don't we apply the rule of Aseh Docha Lo Saseh, that the positive mitzvah of eating matzah the first night of Pesach, which is a mitzvah d'oraisa, should override the Lo Saseh in the Torah, that you're not allowed to eat the new grain until the Omer is brought, and since there was no other grain that was available, so there was no way to avoid the conflict, Aseh Docha Lo Saseh. This is the Yerushalmi's Kasha. So the Yerushalmi gives two terutzim to this Kasha. Both terutzim need a little explanation. Teretz number one is that the mitzvah of matzah on Pesach night was a mitzvah that was given to Bnei Yisrael before Matan Torah. Right, we got that mitzvah in Mitzrayim. That is what is called Aseh, a positive commandment, Kodem Hadibor, that predated the Sinai revelation. Right, that's a fact. So the Yerushalmi creates a new rule, that the only time an Aseh has the power to be docha, a lo saseh, is only if it was an aseh that was given to Moshe in the revelation of Har Sinai, but an aseh that predated the revelation at Har Sinai does not have the power to be docha, to push aside a lo saseh. Meaning an aseh, kaidem hadibor, does not have the koach to set aside a negative commandment. Now, exactly why that should be so, the Yerushalmi does not give you any svara for it whatsoever. Apparently, the idea seems to be that if it was not connected to the Sinai revelation, it somehow is a weaker mitzvah. But one could make the opposite argument. If it was so important that it was given to the Jewish people even before Matan Torah, perhaps that should make it more important rather than less important. And yet the Yerushalmi says, and aseh kodem, anyway, important, less important, doesn't make sense anyway. It's all Hashem's commandments. But the Yerushalmi does lay down a klal, and aseh kodem hadibor cannot be doche a lo saseh. The Shagas asks the kasha, well, wait a second. What about a bris milah on Shabbos, right? Bris milah on Shabbos also works because the mitzvah of milah overrides the lo saseh and of Shabbos, and there we do say aseh docha lo saseh even if bris milah was given to Avram Avinu beforehand. And if you're going to answer, well, yes, it was initially given to Avram beforehand, but it was repeated later in the Torah after Matan Torah, the same thing is true for matzah. The original mitzvah of matzah was given in Parshas Bo before Matan Torah, but it is repeated in Parshas Re'eh after Matan Torah. So the symmetry between Milah and matzah is exactly the same. And if Milah could be Docha Shabbos, then why can't matzah be Docha Chadash? So some want to answer, well, the problem is Shabbos was also given Kaidem Hadibur because we got the mitzvah of Shabbos in Morah. So when the Yerushalmi says an aseh before Matan Torah cannot be docha, a negative, it means an aseh before Matan Torah cannot be docha a lo saseh given after Matan Torah. Masha'en came when Milas docha Shabbos, both of them are kodem hadibur, so both of them are in the same madrega. So when they're in the same madrega, we could be docha. This is, I think the Shagas actually says this teretz. By the way, just as a little aside, I hope and I assume that most of you have heard of the Shagas. I just want to say a little bit about him because for various reasons he's not as widely learnt as he once was. He was one of the great Gedolei Achronim in the time of the Vilna Gaon. And in fact, the Vilna Gaon actually said about the Shagas Aryeh that in Nigla, in the revealed part of the Torah, the two people in the world who are the greatest authorities is who? The Shagas Aryeh and me, meaning the Vilna Gaon put himself second. When it comes to Kabbalah, it's ani v'hu, meaning Shagas Aryeh was great in Kabbalah too, but the Vilna Gaon held he was higher in that inyan of Kabbalah. So that's how great the Shagas Aryeh was. He couldn't hold a job because he was very, very takif. He was very, very definite in his psukim. He did not yield to popular political correctness in halacha. And as a result, he actually got fired quite a few places. He went to a lot of different communities and rabbanis. So just to give you an example of kind of the nature of the Shagas Aryeh, there was a certain minhag that he disallowed because he felt it was against halacha in shul, and the shul went crazy over the minhag, and he said, "Now I see HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a very, very big mistake when he gave the 10 commandments." Okay, they told him, this minhag is in our shul's records. We have a document of all the minhagei Beit Knesset. How dare you argue with what is in the minhagim of the Beit Knesset? So he says, I see Hashem made a very big mistake when he put the Aseret HaDibros in the Torah. He put it in the Torah, people feel free to break it. He should have put it in your shul's minhag book, and then for sure you would have kept it. So even HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he said, made a mistake in how he gave the Torah, because your minhagim are more important to you than the actual mitzvahs of the Torah. Or some say a different version of it. They say, the problem is Hashem should have made the Aseret HaDibros as a yesh omrim in the middle of the Magen Avram for a yarei shemayim who's roi lahachmir. Because when it comes to like little things that a bal nefesh is supposed to be machmir, everybody wants to do that. But nebuch, if it's only a mitzvah, it's only what's so special about that? Everybody has to do that, So we pay more attention to a yesh omrim minority yarei shemayim yesh lahachmir than we do to mamish things that are beferish. So those are two versions of that particular witticism. The other story about the Shagas Aryeh is that he was a very, very independent person, as I said, and he would often be cholek even on Rishonim, as the Vilna Gaon was. He would say that the Rambam didn't have right pshat, he would be machriya and the like. And of course he argued with Achreinim. So the story goes, he actually died because his bookcase collapsed and all of the Sfarim fell upon him, crushing him. These were the Sfarim that were said they were taking revenge against him because he wasn't, he argued with them. He argued with this and that and that and that, and they kind of got their revenge by falling upon him. So as he was dying, quite literally as he was dying, so somebody went over to him and said, you got to do Vide, but he said he wanted to learn Shas one more time before he dies. Before he goes to Olam Haba, he wants to finish Shas. So he had somebody, he could have done it by heart, but he had somebody like hold Gemaras over his head and just turn the pages, quick, so he could finish like Shas one more time before he died. And just every page was like just 30 seconds or whatever it was. And somebody went over to him and said, you're about to die. They were kind of tough then in Lita. He said, you should say Vida. You should confess your Averis. Why are you learning Shas? Do Vida. So he said, it's not that I'm such a tzaddik that I've never sinned. It's just I just never had time to do Averis because I was busy with more important things. Meaning I was, I didn't have time. So, he felt he didn't have that much to do Vida about. By the way, I remember talk about going through Shas. I remember my own Rosh Hashiva, Rav Breitowitz, Zechrono Livracha. He used to come to night seder, just to come. He had a friend night seder, and he would learn if people weren't asking him anything at the moment. He would be learning, and I distinctly remember just as a high school boy, just watching him. He was just turning pages, like Yivamas, whatever it is. That's how familiar these Gedolim were. Modern Gedolim are familiar with Shas, that they mamish just leaf through it. They could chazer a Maseches like Yivamos in an hour or whatever it would be. Just finish the whole Masechta. Quite amazing. Bezras Hashem. One day all of us should be zeicha to that type of madrega. Anyway, but the Shagas Aryeh was a great mefalpel, and as I say, he talks about this Yerushalmi and life. So this is answer number 1 of the Talmud Yerushalmi. Answer number 2 of the Talmud Yerushalmi is even more interesting. Again, what's the kasha? Why didn't they eat matzah? Let's say, asay docha leisasa. Right? That's the question. So the second answer of the Yerushalmi is, you're right. D'oraisa, they should have eaten matzah. And the reason they didn't was a rabbinic decree, meaning a very early rabbinic decree, a decree from the time of Yehoshua, if not earlier. And what is that so? The rule that the aseh overrides the losaseh is only with respect to the amount of matzah you're obligated to eat. Right? That which you have a mitzvah to eat overrides the negative commandment. Now, how much matzah does the Torah say you must eat the night of Pesach? We eat all sorts of extra things, but the oraisa, you fulfill the mitzvah with a single kazayas of matzah. Now, what is a kazayas? Itself has many, many different opinions, but quite literally, a kazayas means the volume of an olive. Although some people seem to assume that an olive is as big as a basketball. That's very typical. But whatever the shear, again, we're not going to talk right now what is the shear of a kazayas. Obviously, the Chazon Ish had a very, very huge size for kazayas. On the other hand, they say b'shem of Chaim Voloshin that a kazayas is the amount of matzah you could fit in your palm, which is very small. I mean, every shear kazayas they give you today is much bigger than that. But Chaim Voloshin said that was the shear of kazayas, matzah in your palm. But whatever it would be. Now, here's the thing: if I were to say aseh docha los aseh, that would only allow me to eat a kazayas, because the mitzvah of matzah will be doche the losaseh of chadash. But if I eat even a tiny bit more than a kazayas, I'm doing the aveira, and I'm not covered by the mitzvah, because I did my mitzvah already. So the gezerah drabanan is, we don't allow you to eat the kazayas of chadash, lest you come to eat more than the kazayas of chadash, in which case you'll be doing an averis. This is the gezerah. Kazayas rishain, the chachamim prohibited eating that first kazayas, even though it should have been covered by essay docha loisasa, lest you come to eat kazayas sheni. Kazayas sheni is left after. Even if you eat less than the kazayas, you'd have an aveira of eating chadash. Which means this is an isur d'Rabbanan. The Rabbanan took away that year the mitzvah of matzah in order that you shouldn't inadvertently come to transgress chadash if you eat more than the requisite kazayas. And even though the chachamim are taking away a mitzvah d'oraisa, they have that power. We see this today when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos. We don't blow shofar on Shabbos because the chachamim were afraid that you might carry the shofar in a reshus harabim. Now the chachamim are taking away a mitzvah d'oraisa, but the klal is, in order to make a fence around the Torah, the chachamim have the authority to even take away a mitzvah if it's passively, meaning they can't tell you to eat treif, but they can tell you not to do a positive commandment. So this is not a unique idea that the chachamim can make a gezerah, take away a mitzvah. The Yerushalmi says that is exactly what they did then. Kazayas rishain atu kazayas sheni. Now, let me give you, the Bavli itself does not ask the question. The Bavli acknowledges. The Bavli just says they didn't eat matzah that year because of the Yisur Chadash. That's all the Bavli says. The Bavli does not ask the question, Esei docha lo saseh, nor does it give the Terutzim, because that is only found in the Yerushalmi, and that's why Tosos and Kedushin supplements the Bavli by bringing in the Yerushalmi. Right? In other words, the Bavli in Kedushin says they didn't eat matzah because of the Yisur Chadash. That's it. Yerushalmi then says, what about Esei docha lo saseh? And it gives the two terutzim. That is why Tosos brings the Talmud Yerushalmi at that particular juncture. But I will tell you that there is a place in the Bavli where the Bavli uses this exact gezerah of we forbid the first thing lest you do more, And it uses it by Yibum. Let's talk about Yibum. Again, we're really digressing a lot, but okay. But this is Yedias HaTorah. So Yedias HaTorah is always good. And that is, let's take the mitzvah of Yibum, right? We read 2 weeks ago that a man dies without children. So there is a mitzvah on his brother to marry the widow. That's called the mitzvah of Yibum in order to perpetuate the seed of the niftar. And if the man does not want to marry her, there's a ceremony of release where the woman takes off his shoe and spits in front of him and says, "So shall be done to the man who does not want to rebuild his brother's home." And that's called Chalitzah, removal of the shoe. And a woman who's a Yavama is not allowed to get married to anybody until she gets Chalitzah. Chalitzah is like a get, essentially. A Yavama is not allowed to get married outside of the Yavam unless it's Chalitzah. Right? So the Torah gives you a mitzvah of Yibum, and it gives you a way out of the mitzvah of Yibum by doing Chalitzah. Okay, digression on digression. What happens today? What happens today? A man dies without children, right? It happens. So what happens today? So it's interesting that technically, according to the Beis Yosef, according to the Mechaber, according to Sfardim, the mitzvah of Yibum is still in effect, and they can do Yibum, and only if they don't want to do Yibum do they do Chalitzah. The Ramah, however, brings, exactly as the Torah says, exactly as the Gemara says, the Ramah, however, brings that the minhag among Ashkenazim is we don't even allow Yibum bisman hazeh, meaning even if the brother is single, he's not married, and he wants to marry his sister-in-law, and she wants to marry him. They both agree. The minhag of Ashkenazim is we only allow Chalitzah, we do not allow Yibum. Now, why is that so? I mean, the Torah itself says Yibum is the better thing to do. The Torah says, do Yibum. If you don't want, then you do Chalitzah. But Yibum is certainly the kavanah of the Torah. So why would it be that Ashkenazim essentially stop doing Yibum? So the reason that's given is based on a Mandi Yomer in the Gemara, based on Abba Shaul, who says the following. In truth, marrying your brother's widow is actually an erva normally. Meaning, for example, if she would have children, not only would there be no mitzvah of Yibum, there would be an aveira to marry, a chi of karetz. So really it's an erva, but in order to in fact it's almost a case of esei dochelosa, but in order to perpetuate the child for the person, the Torah matters the erva. Right? That's how you understand Yibum. So Mamela Abba Shaul argues, this is only going to be mutter if your kavana is l'shem shamayim. If my kavana is to do a mitzvah to give my brother a child, so the Torah matters. If I do Yibum for my own taivas, Abba Shaul says it's considered to be erva. A big chiddush. In other words, Yibum itself would be considered to be gilui arayos spiritually, if it's done with improper kavanah. Therefore, the Ramah says, since bisman hazeh, we have no assurance that our kavanos are totally pure. Therefore, the minhag of Ashkenazim is not to do Yibum at all, even if they both want it. So the only thing Ashkenazim do is Chalitzah. Now, apropos of the idea that marrying your brother's widow, if it's not a mitzvah of Yibum, is gilui arayos, right? I'll tell you a mitzvah with Rav Chaim Eiser. Rav Chaim Eiser Grodzenski of Vilna was the Gadol Hador together with the Chafetz Chaim. He died in 1941. Chafetz Chaim was 33. Rav Chaim Eiser was mamish, the Gadol Hador in all areas. He technically was not the Rav of Vilna because Vilna did not have a Rav, but he was the head of the basin of Vilna and really the Gadol of Klal Yisrael. And because of health reasons, for the month of Av, called it Bein Hazmanim, he would go to certain forest areas in the German-Lithuanian border. Whatever, for rest and the like. And there were a lot of Jews. It was like the Catskills. There were a lot of Yidden there, but it wasn't Vilna. There were modern Jews and different types of Jews. And one time, because of medical reasons, he had to stay there for Elul, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur. And this was very, very sad for him, because he wanted to be Elul and Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. He wanted to be in the more ruchniistic environment of Vilna. He had to be in a German village where, there was a minyan, but it was just, a regular fast minyan, whatever it would be. And he was wondering, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu put him in a matzah where he's not with B'nai Torah, he's not with Talmidei Chachamim? What exactly is his purpose here? So, as he's walking in the forest, he sees a Yid who looks like he's a Litvish Yid, has a beard, a kapata, like someone who's more like his type. So he goes over to the Yid and says, Shalom Aleichem, Reb Yid, it's so good to see you. I see you're a Lithuanian Jew, whatever it would be. He says, what brings you here? So he said, well, I have a sad story. My brother was like a park ranger. My brother managed the forest here. And my brother married a woman, had 3 young children, and he died suddenly. And the children need a father. So I came here to marry my brother's wife so I could help raise these young children. Now, Rav Chaim Eiser turned white, because what the guy is actually saying is, this is Gilui Arayas Mamish. To marry your brother's widow when there are children is an Isser D'Oraisa Chiyuv Kares. That's Pasha. That has nothing to do with the Ramah. The Ramah's Chiddush was, even if there are no children, we don't allow. That's a separate thing. But when there are children, Eishesach Sheyesh Labanim is Arayos D'Oraisa Mamish. So Chaim Eiser says, Rabbi Yitz, you're not allowed to do this. It's an Isser D'Oraisa. So the man didn't know who Rav Chaim Eiser was. So the man says, these kids need a father. She needs a husband. I'm not going to listen to any rabbi with a beard who comes along and tells me something is osir, some chumrah somewhere. He says, I'm not going to listen. So Rav Chaim Eiser says, this is not a chumrah in the Chayei Adam or a Yesh Omrim in the Shulchan Aruch. This is a pasuk in the Chumash. The Chumash says you cannot marry Eishes Ach if there are children. So the man, who apparently was not very learned, says, I'm not going to, I just, what I'm doing is a good thing. Don't talk me out of it. Right? I have conversations like that all the time. Okay. So Rav Chaim Eiser says, what can I do to convince you? He says, I'd have to hear it from a real rabbi. I don't know who you are. He says, I want to hear it from a real rabbi. He says, like who? He says, so he picks him. Like Rav Chaim Ozer Grodzinski of Vilna would have to tell me. So Rav Chaim Ozer, somehow proves that he's him. And Rav Chaim Ozer then says, now I see why HaKadosh Baruch Hu made me stuck here for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, so I could be matzah, this Jew, from an Isser of Gilui Arayas. That's what he says. So the Hashgacha, when it puts you in the right place. In fact, the Matzah of the Lubavitcher Rebbe was actually a beautiful Maisa. This is some Maisa where there was a Chabad convention of women in Detroit or something, and a bunch of women went from New York to Detroit, and they did their thing, and then there was a massive snowstorm, and the women couldn't get back for Shabbos. They couldn't get back, and they didn't know what to do. So they somehow called 770, they called the Rebbe, whatever it would be, and they said, we're lost, we're stranded, what do we do? So the Rebbe said, this is a very, very interesting thing to think about. He says, there is no such thing as a Jew being lost. If you're in the place that you're in, there's a reason Hashem wants you to be in that place. You're not lost. You're in the place where you have to be. You just have to figure out what you're supposed to do in that place. It says a Yid you can't be lost by definition, because the Hashgacha Pratis determines where you are. So what they did was they started, from the convention they had chalos and Shabbos candles, so they started going through the airport, passing out these different things and being with HaRav people and the like, and they saw it as a mission. Instead of kind of saying, I'm lost, I'm stuck here for 10 hours, or I'm stuck here for 2 days, kind of ask yourself, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu put me in this matzah, right? And you see from the Chaim Meiser also a similar aspect to the story. Okay, but now back to Yibum, because I want to show you a place in the Bavli where the Bavli goes like the Yerushalmi. And that is, so there's a mitzvah of Yibum, okay, even though the Ramah says we don't do it, Bisman say, yeah.
So I have two questions on Yibum.
Yeah.
So for the first question, so with Ashkenaz who have that minhag not to do it, right?
I didn't hear you, take it?
So for the Ashkenaz who have that...
Yeah, we don't do it at all, yeah.
Yes, so in the case where both want to do it, does the wife's or widow still have to say that
Yeah, that's a very excellent question, and that bothers me too, because in a sense, the Chalitzah ceremony doesn't make a lot of sense for Ashkenazim. I mean, let's say man wants to do it, woman wants to do it. The Beis Din says you're not allowed to do it. So the woman takes off the man's shoe, she spits in front of him and says, "So shall be done to the man who doesn't want to rebuild his brother's home." But the guy wants to rebuild his brother's home. We told him he's not allowed to do it. It's a good kasha. If you're asking me the answer is we do it anyway. But if you're asking me why, I don't know. It's a good question. Yeah.
And then the second one is, right, if a man dies without children, but he has a brother who's an infant, is the widow forbidden from marrying another man until the infant?
Yeah, that's a very, very big problem. That exactly is a very big problem. If the man has a brother that is 1 day old, she has to wait 13 years to get Chalitzah from him, or potentially Yibum from him. Actually, he can do Yibum from the age of 9. Okay, he cannot give Chalitzah till the age of 13. A katan cannot give Chalitzah. Now, interestingly enough, however, this only applies if the brother was born. If the brother was not born until after his brother died, let's assume that a man dies, but he has a young mother. The young mother is pregnant with another baby, and a brother is born after the death of the first brother. At that point, if he's the only brother, there is no problem. In other words, that's called Eishes Achiv Shelo Haya Ba'olamo. In other words, it is the wife of my brother who never shared a common world with me. And in such a case, there is no Yibum, there is no Chalitzah, so she's free to get married there. But if the baby was born, even 1 second before his brother died, she might be stuck for up to 13 years. Yeah.
Is the woman mechayev to perform Yibum if she wants to be a Yavama and not get married? Is that okay, or does she have to?
Yeah, so that's a good question. In other words, very good question. What if the woman doesn't care? She's not planning on getting married. So under the halacha, if, like Sfardim, if he wanted to do Yibum, she has to agree to that. But let's take like Ashkenazim agree to the question. If Yibum is out of the question, and it's only a matter of Chalitzah, so the question is, why can't the woman just decline? She says, I don't need it. I don't want it. I'm not planning on getting married. So that's a machlokas. The machlokas is, do we look at Chalitzah as a mitzvah, or do we look at Chalitzah as simply a way of permitting her to get married, in which case she could dispense with it? So that is a machlokas, how to do it. You know, Chalitzahs are not that common, because most couples have children or whatever. But I remember, I think I may have mentioned this over the years, that people want to see a Chalitzah because it's not so common. In fact, it's a little unusual. The Beis Din who officiates on a Chalitzah is a 5-member Beis Din, not a 3-member Beis Din. It's unusual. So I remember in Baltimore we got words that a Chalitzah was going to be done a certain day. So I went down to see it because there's a special boot, a special shoe. It's not just a regular shoe. It's like a Viking boot that's laced all the way up to the knee, and the socks are removed and whatever it is, and she has to pull it off him and the like. And the Beis Din has to be sure that she has real saliva. She doesn't spit in his face. She spits in front of him, but they put a black cloth down so you could see the white saliva. And they check it and they be sure that it's there. It's a whole ceremony. So I wanted to see the Chalitzah. So I walk into the shul, there are like 500 people there. I thought there'd be like, maybe 6 people would come to see what it looked like. There are 500 people there, so I didn't see anything. But what was interesting is the woman was not religious at all. She didn't know about this at all. But her brother-in-law, her husband was not religious, but her brother-in-law was from Eretz Israel, and he begged her to agree to the Chalitzah. Even though she didn't need it, she didn't want it, but he begged her, and she agreed. And she figured it would be a very private, he told her it would be 5 minutes, private, in a rabbi's office. So I remember to this day, and I feel guilty to this day, because I was a participant in this. When she walked in, and she thought this would be a private little thing that would take 5 minutes, she was doing it for her brother-in-law's sake, she was so, paralyzed. She was, so embarrassed. And, she had to leave or whatever it would be, and the rabbis took her into the office, calmed her down, gave her a sedative, whatever it would be, because it turned into a massive public thing that she didn't even care about, and she thought it would be a little private thing. So you have to be careful sometimes. People don't always want to be, people who are just watched. We should be spectators at their personal events. But if you actually want to see a Chalitzah, not that I encourage you going to YouTube, like everything else, you can get YouTube videos on Chalitzahs, and you can actually get a good view of how the Chalitzah works. You will see it better than if you actually go to a Chalitzah, because there tends to be big crowds at Chalitzahs. Yeah?
Is Chalitzah done in Reform or the...
Reform, no. Reform movement does not do Chalitzah at all. They don't do get, so they don't do Chalitzah. Yeah.
So if there was a couple that couldn't have kids for some reason, so would you do Chalitzah by a 7-year-old woman whose husband died?
Again, it's a good. This is a very good question, and logically we shouldn't. But Lamaisa, even if she's 115 and cannot possibly have children, we do Chalitzah, and we even do Yibum. We even do Yibum, and if that would be available as an option. Yeah.
In terms of sneers, how does Chalitzah work?
If what?
In terms of sneers,
Yeah.
How does Chalitzah work? We know Ruth went and slept by the feet of Boaz, and she married him. So this woman, first of all, she's interacting with her brother-in-law, then she's touching his feet to remove the shoe. In terms of sneers, how does this?
Well, she doesn't touch his leg. She pulls the shoe from the bottom. It's like a loose slipper, which is tied on the straps that are tied on the leg, but they're loose enough that she pulls from the toe, and she pulls it off. So again, it's a mitzvah. The Torah says it has to be done, and Chalitzah, by the way, cannot be done through a shaliach. So she can't. It's not like a get. Chalitzah, she has to do it to him. There can be no shalichos by Chalitzah, which is, by the way, that sometimes historically Chalitzah has raised some difficult questions, because sometimes the husband's brother is trapped in Russia or China or someplace, and she's an aguna. In other words, the same way a woman without a get is not able to marry, a woman who doesn't get Chalitzah is also not able to marry, and sometimes by get, if you're not dealing with a nasty guy, the guy's not there, he can make a shaliach for a get. Right? A guy's in America, he can make a shaliach in Eretz Israel to give a get. Chalitzah can't. Chalitzah, the yavam, not the yavam, but the brother has to be personally there, and if he's not able to get out, God forbid, that could be a very difficult situation. So there are many, many tshuvas about Chalitzah situations where the Cholaitz was not able to be physically present. Okay, so now,
Is on this.
Yeah.
There was no way the man could have been saved and could have turned into matzah? Because man could have taken...
Yeah. So I think what I explained was that you could not fulfill the mitzvah of matzah through miraculous bread. The mitzvah of matzah must be fulfilled by the 5 types of grain. And even though man could taste like whatever you wanted it to taste like, so man, you could taste matzah in man, but it wasn't actually matzah. And therefore, there was no a way of fulfilling the mitzvah with man. Okay? Alrighty. So now let's take this further. Again, and that is, let's look at asay, docha, losas, and cases of yibum. let's consider the following case. A Kohen marries a woman. The Kohen dies, and the brother of this Kohen happens to be a Kohen Gadol. Right, a Kohen Hedjot dies, and the Yavama falls before a Kohen Gadol. Now we know a Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry a widow. A Kohen Hedjot can marry a widow. A Kohen Gadol cannot marry a widow. So the question is the Kohen Gadol allowed to do Yibum? So you might say, well, let the mitzvah of Yibum override the negative commandment of a Kohen Gadol marrying an almana. So the Gemara says that's not going to work for the following reason. Because when a Kohen Gadol marries an almana, he is not only transgressing a lo taseh, almana lo yikach, but he's also transgressing a positive commandment that he can only marry a virgin and not a non-virgin. So even though an asay pushes aside a lo taseh, an asay cannot push aside a lo taseh and an asay. Because even if the asay pushes away the lo taseh, you have one asay against another asay, so you can't transgress it. So the Gemara says, in almana min hanisuin, right? You guys know, you're learning Kedushin, I assume, but maybe not. You know the two stages of marriage are erusin and nisuin. You covered that? You know that stuff? Okay, I'll go over it very, very quickly. In the time of the Torah and even the time of Chazal, when a man gives a woman money, kesef or shtar, she becomes an arusa, she's his wife, but the marriage was not yet consummated until a year later when they made nisuin. Now, once you make nisuin, she's no longer a virgin, even if she was a virgin before. But during Erison, if this is her first marriage and she had no sexual contact, she would be a virgin. So, when a Kohen Gadol marries an almana from nisuin, forget about Yibum. There is both a lo taseh and an asay. A lo taseh means don't marry an almana lo yikach. And there's an asay, ki im besula meyamav yikach isha, you're only allowed to marry a besula and not a ba'ula. So almana min hanesuin, a Kohen Gadol transgresses both a lo taseh and an asay. But let's assume the woman is a widow not from nisuin. The woman is a widow only from erusin. Meaning a man married her and he died within the 12 months and the marriage was never consummated. So she's still a virgin. So why can't a Kohen Gadol marry her if she's still a virgin? Only because of the negative commandment of don't take an almana, whether it's ersin or nesuin. So you got this? Almana min hanesuin. There's a leisasa v'yaseh. Almana min ersin. There is only a lo taseh. There is no transgression of an asay because she's still a virgin. So now, let's go back to the Kohen Gadol case. Kohen dies, leaving a widow. Brother is a Kohen Gadol. The Mishnah says in Maseches Yevamis that the Kohen Gadol cannot do Yibum. The Kohen Gadol must do Chalitzah. That's the Mishnah. The Gemara asks, why is that so? Bishlama, if she's an almana min hanesuin, so she's not a virgin. I understand why he has to do chalitza, because he's not going to have the heter of asay doche lo taseh, because an asay cannot be doche lo taseh the asay. But if she's an almana min ha'erusin, meaning she's still a virgin, so the only thing that's stopping him from marrying the widow is a lo taseh, then why don't I say Yibum, as I say, docha lo saseh? And since the Mishnah seems to give a general rule, any widow the Kohen Gadol only gives chalitzah to, frek the Gemara, why should that be so if it's almana min ha'erusin? The Gemara's answer is, Dioraisa, a Kohen Gadol could be miyabim almana min ha'erusin, because of asay docha lo sasa. But since the mitzvah of Yibum is fulfilled by the first bia, he would have to divorce her immediately after bia rishona, just to do the Yibum. And Chazal were gozer, mamish like the Yerushalmi's answer by the matzah, they prohibited the first consummation, lest it turn into another consummation, which would be a negative commandment, no longer covered by the mitzvah of Yibum. So the point of this long digression is just to show you that in the Bavli, the gezerah of answering the first, lest you come to a second, that the Yerushalmi used as an answer for matzah, the Bavli uses as an answer for Yibum, almana min ha'erusin. Gezerah bia rishona, atu bia shnia. Okay, right. So that's the Eshdi Yerushalmi. Now next week in Mitzvah Hashem, well, obviously Wednesday there's no shir. Monday, Tuesday's regular schedule. You know. All right. So we'll go back to Yoshua next week. Okay. Good.
Thank you for listening to this Awesome Ech production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.